Hi everyone, welcome to this session on the Internet of the Orals. My name is Agha Ali Raza and I'm an assistant professor at the Lahore University of Management Sciences. Feel free to call me Ali. I know that some parts of my name could be a little bit hard to pronounce. I would like to thank you, and especially Sasha, for inviting me to present in your class. It's a pleasure to be here. So in this session, we will be talking about, or in fact, we'll be taking a stroll through the development of voice-based services for development over the last 10 to 12 years, as it has happened within our group and within other research groups. And then finally, we will be talking about the Super Abbu hotline, which is right now active, and we are conducting randomized controlled trials on that hotline. I think in some other lectures you have already heard about that. Sasha is a very active member of that team. So yeah, let's begin. So here are two readings that I would like to recommend for those of you who are interested in knowing more about this domain of the Internet of the Orals, that is the use of speech-based services, voice-based services over simple phones for providing information access and connectivity to low-literate, non-tech-savvy audiences. So the first one is a CACM article. The second one is a book chapter. I don't think that the book has been officially made available as yet, but you can get a draft of this chapter from my website that I will mention in the last slide, but it's simply my name, aghaaliRaza.com. So feel free to get it from there. These are the papers. I'll of course share the slides with you, but these are the main papers that have covered the details that I'll be discussing in these slides. All right, so let's begin. Okay, so we'll begin with the internet, which is, as we all know and agree, it's an amazing thing. It has transformed the way people participate in information ecology and digital economy. So you have your social media, your online discussion forums, your crowdsourcing marketplaces, and so on and so forth. It's a great phenomenon. But my question to you is that if the internet empowers people who enjoy access to it, do you think there is anyone who's left out? Now, because you are currently finishing a course on topics of information and communication technologies for development with Sasha, so I'm sure that you already know the answer. It leaves out a lot of people in the world. Uh, so these stats might be a little bit outdated. I dug them out a few months back, but right now there are approximately 3.6 billion people in the world who are offline. So that makes up 46.4% of the world population. 13.4% of these people, so these are disproportionately divided or spread across the world. So 13.4% of the developed world, 53% of the developing world, and 80.9% of the least developed countries. So this is an ITU listing. I've given the link below so you can look up these list of countries, but these fraction of people are offline. They don't have access to the internet. So there are many reasons for people being offline. So they're either too poor to afford internet enabled devices, or too remote to access the internet, or too low literate and non-tech savvy to navigate the mostly text driven internet. Digging a little bit further, 13.7% of the world population comprises of non-literate adults. So these are not including low literates. So these are non-literate adults, and 2/3 of these are women. More men than women use the internet, and this gap is smaller in the developed countries, but way larger in the developing countries and the least developed countries. Looking at people by disabilities, so 285 million people in the world are visually impaired, and 90% of them live in low income settings. So that also gives you an idea that if you're creating services, accessibility services for people, then how useful a purely internet based service would be for such audiences, and how inclusive would it be towards them. And these estimates do not count people who are low literate, people who belong to oral cultures, who are native speakers of unwritten languages. So interestingly, 46% of all languages in the world are unwritten. They don't have a writing system. By the way, just be careful with these stats. These are 46% of all languages, not 46% of the population in any way. So of course, the number of people who speak these languages are also much smaller. All right. So just also for your interest, giving you the stats from the country that I'm speaking from, Pakistan, and where Sasha also conducts most of her research right now. So in Pakistan, the internet penetration is less than 24%, and in India, it's around 35%. Now, so what this all means is that there is a lack of access to information and connectivity. And why is that important? Because it could be a major impediment to development. So connectivity allows you to have access to information about, say, finances, banking, education, agriculture, weather, and so on and so forth. Health being one of the main categories in that regard. So therefore, if we are on the same page about the information and connectivity being an important aspect of the development of a society, then I think we are ready to move on to the next step of figuring out what's available, what's feasible, and what's not feasible. So if you want to reach these hard to reach populations, your computers, your laptops, tablets are not generally visible. Television and radio are non-interactive. Smartphones are not always visible, although this statement and the realities on ground are changing very rapidly, but still, just owning a smartphone does not mean that the user is comfortable with the smart features of that phone. So just keep that thought in mind. That's a longish discussion that I don't want to dive into right now, but smartphones are generally not visible. Textual interfaces are problematic for non-literate users. So very quickly you realize that you need to think out of the box here. There are researchers who are working on text-free interfaces, like Indrani Medithis, who works at Microsoft Research India. I would love you to basically look up her work. She does very interesting things in that domain. The pathway that we take towards solving this problem is by realizing that these populations speak and listen. That's how they live their lives. That's how they conduct their business. And most of them have access to some sort of a mobile phone, not necessarily a smartphone, generally a button phone, a simple dumb feature phone. So the global mobile phone penetration is at 73%, and it's around 70% in developing countries. So speech over simple phones could be a viable way of reaching these low literate populations. And our research and the research done by many other groups around the world has shown that it is indeed a viable way of reaching these audiences. So before I move further in this presentation, let me quickly establish the area in which we are conducting this research. So you have your speech and language technologies, which are the core. So it's a part of computer science mostly, and it comes under machine learning, where you come up with things like speech recognition and text-to-speech and so on and so forth. You have your machine learning for social good domain. You have your human-computer interaction, and at the intersection of these domains sits this field of research that we are discussing today, which is called speech and language technologies for development. So just for your interest, you should know you should be able to locate this particular area of research within the knowledge domains. All right, so this this was realized that we can create speech-based services that are accessible over simple phones to provide information access and connectivity to low-literate, non-tech-savvy audiences. So this was realized pretty much around 2005, even a little bit before that. And people started creating those services. Now, when they did so with the assumption that the target audiences would find it very easy to use such services, and these services would spread and everyone would be using them, these assumptions were proven wrong very quickly. And it was found that there were several further hurdles, secondary hurdles to the proliferation and the use of such services. So the first one was the user interface hurdle. The problem was that even with these simple services, users needed training, and a personal training, a face-to-face training is not scalable. So you can bring people to your lab and you can train them, or you can go to them and you can train them. You can train 50 or 100 or 200, but it's difficult to train like thousands or millions of people. The second problem was the motivation and trust hurdle. You have created an information service. Let's say you're going into a village telling people about which pesticides to use in their farms, in their for their crops. Now you are bringing in new information. Why should they trust you? They have their age-old practices that they can rely on. Then why should they trust you? So there's the motivation to the use of the service and the trust of the information hurdle that you need to overcome. And then finally, there's the uptake and spread hurdle. You are talking about populations who are underconnected by definition. So then how do you, in the first place, advertise these services to those populations? All right, so around 2010, I started working in this domain. I started my PhD at Carnegie Mellon, this big question was the first thing that was part of my thesis. That how do you overcome these hurdles? How do you create something that can overcome these hurdles? And our strategy, the strategy that we came up with, was entertainment. Entertainment, we believe, could overcome all of these hurdles. All right, so in 2010, there was this amazing paper that came out of Microsoft Research India by Smyth et al., in which it was shown that users overcome interface hurdles if they have a strong desire to do so. And entertainment was shown as one of the universal motivators that can motivate a user to overcome any interface hurdle. So if you want to do it, you're going to do it. I think the title of the paper was also "Where there's a will, there's a way." The second great thing about entertainment is that you do not need to convince someone to be entertained. They know that. So there is that motivation hurdle can also be overcome using entertainment. And then finally, if you create something which is simple and fun, then users would probably spread it to others by themselves. So it's going to become viral. So that viral spread could basically allow you to overcome the spread hurdle for your services. Like all of your users would be your spreaders, or most of them at least. All right, so this is concretely what our strategy was: the use of viral entertainment as a vehicle to disseminate development related information. And this is what we came up with. So in Urdu, here you see written Mia Mittu, which translates to Polly in English. So Polly is a telephone-based, voice-based service which allows users to make a short recording of their voice, to modify it using a bunch of fun voice modification effects, and to forward it to their friends. So that was the simple idea, and now I would like to basically show you a demo, or rather a typical user interaction with Polly, and usually this clears up everything about like how these services work and how they reach the users. So see you after the demo.
हेलो, अस्सलाम वालेकुम। अब आप अपनी आवाज़ को तरह तरह के दिलचस्प अंदाज में बदल सकते हैं। बस बीप की आवाज़ के बाद कुछ भी कहें और हैश का बटन दबाएं।
हेलो आरिफ, क्या हाल है? जॉब पे गए हो या नहीं, या घर पे ही रोटियां तोड़ रहे हो?
क्या आप अपनी दिलचस्प अंदाज में बदली हुई आवाज़ सुनने के लिए तैयार हैं? ये लीजिए।
हेलो आरिफ, क्या हाल है? जॉब पे गए हो या नहीं, या घर पे रोटियां तोड़ रहे हो?
दोबारा रिकॉर्ड करने के लिए 0 दबाएं। दोबारा सुनने के लिए 1 दबाएं। यह आवाज़ किसी को भेजने के लिए 2 दबाएं। अगली आवाज़ सुनने के लिए 3 दबाएं। मुलाजमत के इश्तिहारात मुफ्त सुनने के लिए 5 दबाएं। जिन्हें भेजना चाहते हैं उनका नंबर मिलाएं और आखिर में हैश का बटन दबाएं। बीप की आवाज़ के बाद अपना नाम बोलें, क्योंकि आपकी आवाज़ के साथ आपका नाम भी भेजा जाएगा।
फहद।
और भी किसी को भेजने के लिए 1 दबाएं, वरना 2 दबाएं। शुक्रिया, मियां मिट्ठू जल्द ही आपका पैगाम पहुंचा देगा। अब आप अपनी बाकी शरारत भरी आवाज़ें सुनें।
हेलो,
अस्सलाम वालेकुम। मियां मिट्ठू को आपके लिए एक पैगाम दिया गया है। भेजने वाले ने मियां मिट्ठू को अपना नाम बताया है,
फहद।
और वो पैगाम ये है।
हेलो आरिफ, क्या हाल है? जॉब पे गए हो या नहीं, या घर पे रोटियां तोड़ रहे हो?
इस पैगाम के भेजने वाले का फ़ोन नंबर सुनने के लिए 0 दबाएं। पैगाम दोबारा सुनने के लिए 1 दबाएं। दोस्तों को भेजने के लिए 2 दबाएं। जवाब देने के लिए अस्सलाम वालेकुम। अब आप घर बैठे अखबारात के ताज़ा तरीन इश्तिहारात बिल्कुल मुफ्त सुन सकते हैं।
यह इश्तिहार 26 अगस्त 2012 को जंग अखबार में दिया गया। लाहौर डिफेंस में ड्राइवर की असामी खाली है। इस मुलाजमत में ख्वाहिशमंद अफराद इस नंबर पर रब्ता करें, 55503015।
All right, so you saw the demo. So I would like you to basically think about two particular aspects of that interaction. The first one was quite obvious because we mentioned it in bold, and that was where you saw the information about the job ad service coming up again and again in the interaction. So this job audio browser was basically just the first development related service that we came up with. We just wanted to test if Poly has the capability of piggybacking, of spreading a second service on top of it. So Poly is the entertainment conduit. Poly reaches out to the users. It establishes trust. It trains people to use speech-based interfaces. And once they are connected, now as part of that interface, Poly allows users to interact with something which is more instrumental, which is more development related. And so Job Ad Browser was our first service. So I was doing my field research in Pakistan, and we realized that in the daily newspapers, there are many ads which are about entry-level jobs like maids and gardeners and guards. And ironically, those people are not able to read those ads because they're not they're not literate usually. So we thought that, okay, we can just record these ads in our own voice and make them available through Poly for audio browsing. So that was our first service that we created over Poly. The second thing that I would like you to observe about that interaction that you just saw is that the name of the sender is played at the very beginning of the interaction in the call to the friend. Why is this important? This is important to catch the attention of the recipient of that cold call, because the recipient is not expecting a call. And what happens with cold calls usually is that users just hang up. Like it could be a marketing call, it's a call from an unknown number. So either you don't pick up, and even if you pick up, you just hang up very quickly. But so of those users who do pick up, we grab their attention by mentioning the name of the sender, who is supposedly a well-known name to them, and that grabs their attention for a few minutes, which is all we need for them to get a taste of Poly and to start using that service. So those are important hurdles that we were coming up with through those seemingly obvious or simple things which were happening in the interface. All right, so the way the Job Audio browser worked was that we just scanned the daily Pakistani newspapers for job ads related to these target audiences. We recorded them and made them available through Poly. All right, so we deployed Poly in Lahore. I was working at the same university at LUMS, and I was an RA here. So we just wrote out Poly's phone number on pieces of paper and handed those out to different office boys here who are usually not very literate. And we did not explain to them what the service is about. We just gave them the phone number and asked them, here is a phone number, call it and see what happens. So they started calling the service. So there were 5 users who basically, so the actual story is a little bit longish. I'm just summarizing it a little bit, but so the summary is that it was seeded with 5 users, and after that we never advertised the service. So within a year, Poly had received 636,000 phone calls by 165,000 users, all virally recruited to the service. So none of them were explicitly reached out by us, like they spread the word to others. And at its peak, Poly was spreading to 1,000 new people every day. So 34,000 people of these users also started using the job search service. They listened 386,000 times to the 728 job ads which were available on the platform, and 19,000 users also forwarded those ads to their friends. So undoubtedly Poly became viral. It spread really quickly. So if you look at the papers that I mentioned towards the beginning, we also analyzed the viral spread of the service, the spread rate, and so on and so forth. So it became very successful in that regard, that it was able to train users were able to use interesting features on the platform. We have actually analyzed the user behavior on the platform, their interaction with more complex features of the interface, and so on and so forth. So in all those regards, Poly was able to do what it was designed for. Here you see a user retention graph. We measure the user retention as a fraction of users who are still active after a certain number of days after their initial use of the service. So here on the horizontal axis you see days post first encounter with Poly, and on the vertical axis you see the fraction of users who are still active. So you can see that on their first day everyone is active, and on the second day around 35% of users come back to Poly, and on their third day less than 20% come back. So there are 2 things to observe here. One, the enthusiasm is lost very quickly, which is to be assumed because a voice modification based entertainment is too simple to keep you entertained for lengthy periods of time. So some of these users were calling the service like tens of times per day. So it's like after some time you lose your interest in voice modifications, like we have at the times if you have played games like Talking Tom and others. So they don't keep entertaining you for a very long time. And neither was that our goal at that point, to provide people with a more long-term entertainment. The other interesting aspect here is that a few people continue using Poly long-term. How long-term? Several months actually. So in this graph you just see 1 month, but in subsequent studies we have actually seen people coming back to the service again and again. So these were the users who had found some other instrumental use of the service, like a voice messaging service or a free voice messaging service, because we were paying for all the call costs. So these are the users who continue using Poly long term. All right, we listened to samples of recordings from the users. We also called up a random subset of our users to figure out information about their demographics, and we found that Poly was used mostly by men, so 11% females, and all the rest of them were men. And this, by the way, has been a problem with these voice-based services over simple phones, that we do not see a lot of female participation. I actually have a paper with a colleague at Cornell, which is exactly on this point of the low participation of females on these platforms, which basically tells that it's not just the availability of the phones, it's much more than that. These women, when they come on social platforms, so Poly was not social, but the subsequent services were social platforms, they face harassment, they face unwelcoming behavior by some of the participants, which usually puts them off and they stop using these services. Okay, moving on, in terms of languages, because the initial users who were given Poly's phone number belonged to Punjab, in different regions of Punjab, so we saw a lot of Punjabi on the platform, which is spoken in the Punjab province. But then as it spread to other parts of Pakistan, we saw a lot of other languages. All right, so based on the survey calls, we found that Poly was primarily used by low-educated, low-income people, although there were some people who had higher education, but they were still using Poly. All right, here is another graph which shows you, so this is a map of Pakistan. I call it the chickenpox map of Pakistan. So here you see these circles, and the area of each circle is proportional to the number of calls that we have received from that area. So you see that Poly started here in Lahore, close to Lahore actually, and then it started spreading initially to the big cities, so Islamabad and Multan and Karachi and Quetta, and then afterwards into the suburban areas as well. So it spread all over Pakistan. We also got a handful of calls from other countries, which we blocked afterwards because we had to pay for the call costs, in this case international call costs. All right, so this was a brief introduction of Poly. Now at the end of that, the conclusion of that Poly research, we realized that there were many questions that came up as part of that research. One, how do you improve the user retention? How do you ensure a continuous supply of fresh content? How do you keep the entertainment going? How do you keep a user busy and entertained and engulfed in the platform? And then how do you, another range of problems was that how do you moderate, you index and search and categorize the audio content which is available on the platform, because like you have thousands of users and you have hundreds of hours of recordings, so it's difficult for expert moderators in your lab to moderate content at such a large scale. So we needed to come up with ways of like doing all of this somehow. And then finally, and this is also of personal interest to me because my core training is in speech and language technologies and machine learning, how do you come up with natural language processing techniques for doing these things for you, for doing these auto filtrations and abuse detection and misinformation detection and so on and so forth. So for that you need large data sets which come from natural sources, so large data sets of these diverse genres and languages and accents and ages, and these platforms can have the ability of gathering such data sets. So these were the big questions with which we proceeded beyond Poly. So our strategy of attaining all of that was social connectivity. So the goal for this line of research was to provide social connectivity to underconnected populations, to give them a voice and a digital social identity, in addition to overcoming or to trying to overcome the challenges that I've just mentioned on the last slide. So the specific goals of this intervention was to spread virally, engage and retain users. So the first two were achieved by Poly, but the third was not. Encourage dialogue and diversity of content on the platform. So this time we actually wanted people to communicate with others, not just peer-to-peer, one person sending a message to others. We wanted people to communicate. We wanted a more broadcast platform, like where everyone can talk to anyone on the platform. we wanted to involve the community in content management. So we wanted to crowdsource the content management. So think of it like a Reddit, where anyone can comment on or vote the content up or down. So people can help you moderate and flag things like abuse and misinformation and so on and so forth. One of the big problems with such voting-based platforms is that the majority often has the ability to mark what is high quality and low quality content on the platform. So in a way here the majority can suppress the voice of the minorities. So one of our goals was also to come up with ways on our platform of making even the less popular content accessible to everyone. And then finally, we also wanted to use the gathered data to create these language corpora and train models for doing speech and natural language processing. All right, so this is what we came up with, Baang. So Baang in Urdu means the call of a rooster, the cock-a-doodle-doo. It also means to call out loudly. So Baang is a voice-based, telephone-based social platform that allows audio content creation and sharing amongst its open community of users. So on Baang, users can post audio messages. They can play messages posted by others, and after listening to each message, they can like it, they can dislike it just by pressing a button, they can report abuse, they can comment, like post audio comments, and share just like in Poly, forward messages to others. And they can also while they want to listen to when they want to listen to the content, they can sort it by recency, like the most recent content first, by popularity, or by trending. So just at this point, even before showing you the demo, I would like to discuss the importance of these various features, why we had them in place here. So we wanted to use these likes, dislikes, and reports to help us with the community supported content moderation. So whatever is flagged by the community, our moderators should give more attention to that, or more urgent attention to that content, and get to it earlier. So this is not purely community moderation, this is not purely expert moderation, it's somewhere in between, where the community supports the expert moderators. The comments were there to motivate users to keep returning to the service. So this is something that we actually learned after the effect, after we analyzed the data from Baang, that there was a higher association between people who comment and people who come back to the service, even more so than people who post messages and people who keep returning to the service. So we found that the comments, like the act of commenting, corresponds more closely with the act of returning to the service or keep using the service. So this was an interesting finding for us. Sharing was a feature that was kept in there for the viral spread of the service, and in the sorting order, the recency was kept in there to allow people to access everything unfiltered, like in the sense that we did not want the majority to dictate that what anyone can listen to on the platform. So by recency, you can just listen to anything which is coming in. The problem obviously there was that people could post abusive messages or hate content, but again, because we wanted the community to help us with moderating that content, this was not a problem on Baang. And Baang was a general purpose platform, not a very sensitive topic platform like health or some other thing where you need to be very careful about the kind of information that is shared. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a typical user interaction with Baang to give you an idea of how it works, and then we'll proceed from there.
बांग को कॉल करने का शुक्रिया, हम आपको जल्द ही वापस कॉल करेंगे।
हेलो,
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, बांग की सर्विस में खुश आमदीद। बांग में आप कोई भी बात रिकॉर्ड कर सकते हैं और उसे मुल्क भर के लोगों तक पहुंचा सकते हैं। अपनी बांग रिकॉर्ड करने के लिए 1 दबाएं, दूसरों की बांगें सुनने के लिए 2 दबाएं, अपनी रिकॉर्ड की हुई बांगों के बारे में मालूमात हासिल करने के लिए 3 दबाएं। बांग सुनने के बाद पसंद और नापसंद का वोट देना ना भूलें। ज़्यादा पसंद की जाने वाली बांगें पहले सुनाई जाती हैं। आज की सबसे ज़्यादा पसंद की जाने वाली बांगें सुनने के लिए 1 दबाएं, ताज़ा तरीन बांगें सुनने के लिए 2 दबाएं, ज़्यादा पसंद की जाने वाली बांगें सुनने के लिए 3 दबाएं, किसी मखसूस कोड नंबर की बांग सुनने के लिए 4 दबाएं, पिछले मेन्यू में वापस जाने के लिए 5 दबाएं। کسی بھی وقت مینیو میں جانے کے لیے کوئی بھی بٹن دبائیں۔ 755 ووٹس کے ساتھ پہلی بانگ۔
السلام علیکم، میرا نام محمود الحسن ہے۔ میں EUWT اسلام آباد میں جو نابیناؤں کا ادارہ ہے اس میں جاب کرتا ہوں ایز اے ٹیچر۔ میری تمام بلائنڈ بچوں سے یہ خواہش ہے کہ پلیز اس ادارے میں ایڈمیشن کر لیں، کیونکہ میں نے زندگی میں ایک ایسا ادارہ دیکھا ہے جو کہ بلائنڈ بچوں کی زندگی کے سنورنے کے لیے بہت اچھا ہے۔ یہاں پر بچوں کو کمپیوٹر، بریل اور
دوبارہ سننے کے لیے 1 دبائیں، پسند کا ووٹ دینے کے لیے 2 دبائیں، ناپسند کا ووٹ دینے کے لیے 3 دبائیں، اس بانگ کو رپورٹ کرنے کے لیے 4 دبائیں، اس بانگ کے بارے میں لوگوں کی رائے سننے کے لیے 5 دبائیں، اگلی بانگ سننے کے لیے 6 دبائیں، پچھلی بانگ سننے کے لیے 7 دبائیں، یہ بانگ دوستوں کو بھیجنے کے لیے 8 دبائیں، پچھلے مینیو میں واپس جانے کے لیے 9 دبائیں۔
یار یہ تو سہیل کے کام کی بانگ ہے۔
جن کو بھیجنا چاہتے ہیں ان کا نمبر ملائیں اور آخر میں ہیش کا بٹن دبائیں۔ بیپ کے بعد اپنا نام بولیں کیونکہ اس بانگ کے ساتھ آپ کا نام بھی بھیجا جائے گا۔
مختار۔
شکریہ، یہ بانگ آپ کے دوست کو جلد ہی بھیج دی جائے گی۔ اپنی بانگ ریکارڈ کرنے کے لیے 1 دبائیں، دوسروں کی بانگیں سننے کے لیے بانگ میں آپ جو کچھ بھی ریکارڈ کریں گے اس کو بانگ استعمال کرنے والا ہر شخص سن سکتا ہے، اور اس کو ہم بانگ اور دیگر سروسز کو بہتر بنانے کے لیے اپنی ریسرچ میں بھی استعمال کریں گے۔ برائے مہربانی اپنی ذاتی معلومات جیسا کہ فون نمبر، ایڈریس وغیرہ دینے سے پرہیز کریں۔ بیپ کے بعد اپنی بانگ ریکارڈ کریں اور آخر میں ہیش کا بٹن دبائیں۔
یار آپ میں سے کسی کو معلوم ہے کہ چھوٹے بچے کا پہلا ID کارڈ کس دفتر سے اور کیسے بنواتے ہیں؟ برائے مہربانی کومنٹ کر کے جواب دیں، شکریہ۔
آپ کی بانگ کا کوڈ نمبر ہے 4837۔ یہ کوڈ دوستوں کو بتائیں اور اپنی بانگ کو پسند کرنے کو کہیں۔ زیادہ پسند کی جانے والی بانگیں پہلے سنائی جاتی ہیں اور اس بانگ کو ریکارڈ کرنے والے کا نام بھی سنایا جاتا ہے۔ اس طرح آپ مشہور بھی ہو سکتے ہیں۔
Alright, so you have now seen how Baang works. So Baang was deployed in Pakistan. We actually deployed it on multiple occasions. So there were things that we were testing for, and you feel free to look at the paper on Baang for more details. But I'll just club it all together and just show you the cumulative stats of Baang as it was launched for an overall period of 8 months. Within those 8 months, we got more than 269,000 phone calls by more than 10,000 users. Users posted a total of 44,000 audio messages on the platform. So these were the posts that they created. These posts were played more than 2.8 million times. So it was close to 3 million times that these posts were overall played by these 10,290 users. We were successful in gathering more than 1,000 hours of speech data, of which 438 hours were of posts and 46 hours comprised of the comments in 10 languages. By the way, this does not mean that we just had 10 languages. It just means that my team who were annotating these posts could only speak between them these 10 languages, and beyond that they marked everything as miscellaneous or other language. So there was a big other language category here. So these interactions were very rich. If you go into more detail, so there were a lot of upvotes, there were a lot of downvotes, there were reports of abuse, there were 124,000 voice comments by 2,400 users, and these posts were shared 94,000 times by 2,300 users with their 7,500 friends. So there was rich interaction throughout the platform, and it spread to many new users, and the engagement of the platform was fairly high. Alright, so based on telephonic surveys, again, just like after Poly, we did telephonic surveys of 276 users, and we found that Baang was used mostly by low-educated young men, with a large fraction, 30%, having no formal education. Once again, there was very little female participation, just 7%, and basically it was Baang that we used for the analysis that I discussed with you earlier, where we tried to figure out the reason for the low participation of female users. So we compared Baang and another platform, Sangeet Swara, which was similar to Baang in many regards, and it was launched before Baang. So we compared the two platforms, one in India, one in Pakistan, and we tried to figure out the reasons for the low female participation. So yeah, I would highly recommend that paper if you're interested in understanding those reasons. A significant number, 32% of the users had more than 10 years of education. So Baang had significantly more higher educated users compared to Poly, and 69% of the contacted users, like by contacted here we mean in our survey calls, 69% of the users were visually impaired. So this was a very interesting finding for us because we never specifically advertised the platform to any visually impaired users. So those users just found out about the platform. In the later surveys, we found that they have their own networks where they spread the word about services which are accessible. So once like one such user finds out about the service, they spread it to their friends. So that accounts. And so in India, with Sangeet Swara, a very similar thing happened, that they also had a lot of visually impaired users. So that's also another interesting aspect or a use case for these platforms. All right, so there's a big section in the paper on the qualitative analysis of the posts, but going over it very quickly. Out of we listened to 13,000 randomly selected recordings. Of those, 91% had actual content, and only 9% had just noise and silence, like people coughing and not knowing what to say and so on. And almost all the well-formed posts contained carefully recorded quality content. So this is a very important finding for us. Like, these users really learned how to record things within that 1 minute interval that we provided them. So sometimes they had to go through it multiple times because the platform plays your recording back to you. That allows you to improve it and re-record it. So they did all of that, and they became better at recording these posts. 90% of the posts were male recorded. There were 10% female recorded posts, and 4.3% contained profanity. So profanity was not a lot on the platform, fortunately. Another interesting thing to mention here is that although the female recorded posts were low in number, but they were very high in terms of the number of votes that they got. So it was quite often that a female recorded post remained at very high ranks in the voting order. So when we played posts by popularity, we informed them that this is the number of upvotes that this post has received, and often female posts got those initial positions in that listing. All right, so this is a very brief summary of the kind of things that people recorded. So, and there is a longer version of it that you can see on the right that I won't be discussing it here. It's from the paper. But there were discussion, there were arguments, there were grievances, there were greetings, there were season greetings, there were occasion greetings, there were advertisements, personal ads of their own business, things that they were buying and selling. There was religious content. There were hymns and prayers and recitation of religious content and so on and so forth. There were songs and poetry and music. People also recorded stuff from other sources like television and radio and played it on Baang. There were requests for prayer and support. So there were community support circles that really quickly formed on the platform. There was some profanity and hate speech and pre-recorded content, as I have already mentioned. So there were some really interesting types of things that were recorded on the platform that I would like to mention. Like, for example, people started using their Baangs for recording, for example, lectures. So there were teachers who were teaching Arabic and English and other languages, and everything was compressed so that it's like a series of these Baangs on this topic. So here's a lecture series on Arabic, where like in 1 minute you give people tips and tricks of of learning the language and so on and so forth. There were also these DJ style radio programs. So you can think of, like, just within 1 minute there's a guy or a woman who's speaking, and she's taking on guests, or he's taking on guests in that 1 minute where they're having a telephonic conversation. Okay, so we have Mr. Blah and Blah with us today, and he will be singing for us, and now there's a demand from the audience, and here's a song for you, and it's a morning show, or it's an evening show, or it's a midnight hour, or whatever, so on and so forth. So this was a very interesting use of Baang by people, where they completely used it for creating their own interesting sorts of content. There were many other interesting things that we found on the platform, which were being posted by the users, that you can find in more detail in the paper. In terms of spread, 60% of all new users came in via the calls that conveyed shared posts to their friends. So the forwarding was responsible for bringing in 60% of all new users. 28% of new users came in via word of mouth, and these are the users whose phone numbers just popped into the system. Like the system had never called them, they just called us. So we believe that these users, or at least most of them, came in through word of mouth recruitment, like people discussing it offline amongst themselves. And 12% of the users came in through Poly. So Baang was also advertised over Poly. There was an overlap in the timeline of Poly and Baang. So some of the initial users of Baang came in through Poly, and those were the 12%. And after that, we stopped advertising Baang on Poly, and then the two services were independent of each other. All right, so here, if you remember, one of our big goals for Baang was to improve the user retention. Now, as I said, Baang was launched in multiple waves, and also Poly was launched multiple times. So here you see actually, so it's a retention graph similar to the one that you saw before. On the horizontal axis, you see the days post a user's initial encounter with the service, and on the vertical axis, you see the fraction of users who are still active. And you see here 5 launches, 2 launches of Poly, these red triangles and this black squares, and then you see 3 launches of Baang. And you can clearly see Poly is here. The retention of Poly is very low, and the retention of Baang is comparatively very, very high. How high? So Poly, for example, on the 27th day is close to the 0th mark. So it's like less than 10% of the users are coming back to the service, like maybe even less than 5% here. And here you can see the highest the Baang is reaching is more than 20%. So more than 20% of the users are calling the service back after close to a month of their initial use of the service. So we saw a great increase in the user retention and lesser user churn for Baang compared to our previous services. So social networking, as we expected, leads to higher user retention compared to peer-to-peer entertainment-driven messaging. All right, so these are just some interesting findings. I'm just presenting them without giving you a lot of proof for this, but all of that proof can be found in the paper. So we saw high user retention amongst users who engaged with all features of the platform, like listening, posting, voting, commenting, and forwarding. This was not very surprising. The act of posting Baangs alone does not correspond with very high user retention. That was an interesting finding. Like we expected people who are creating new content to keep coming back to the service, but we actually found that the actions of commenting and forwarding can be used as predictors of continuation of the use of service, or actually predictors of immediate termination of the use of service as well. So we have done like both of that in the paper, and we have shown that these could be used as predictors. So the act of commenting is a reliable predictor that a user is going to continue using the service, and similarly for forwarding. User engagement with more sophisticated interface features is highly associated with lengthier and more frequent calls and more active days. So that was another interesting finding for us through the study. However, it's very important to note here that we did not establish any causal relationships here. We were not conducting any RCTs, so these are just associations. So there are multiple ways of explaining what was happening, and like it could be going the other way as well. Like people who are continuing to use the service are commenting more, as opposed to people who are commenting more are continuing to use the service. So we don't know this direction of causality. We just know there is a high association between these two traits. So another interesting study that we did, and we are actually right now busy in analyzing this data, that we were interested in figuring out if Baang could be used as a vehicle for providing underconnected populations with reliable information about COVID-19. So we launched a COVID hotline in Pakistan last year. So in 2020, it was launched around March 2020, and it remained online for several months. So we are analyzing the data from that platform, from that launch. What we did was we started making reliable messages about COVID-19 from the NIH and other reliable sources, World Health Organization and other sources, and we just made those audio messages available over Baang for browsing in a separate menu. And there was a lot of other stuff that was happening in that platform. So yeah, if you are interested in this kind of stuff, I would ask you to stay tuned in for more information from us from that launch. All right, so the next big question in our research was to measure the impact of these platforms. So we wanted to come up with automated ways of at least figuring out some of the impact of these services that we were creating. So the large scale impact measurement was the next goal. So we wanted to rapidly measure the impact of these large scale information dissemination campaigns on knowledge and beliefs and on behaviors. So the strategy that we used at this point was voice-based community quizzes. So we created this platform. It's called Sawaal. In Urdu, you also see the same word Sawaal written here. So Sawaal was a voice-based telephone service that allows its open community of users to post and attempt multiple choice questions and to vote and comment on them. So the goals here were to rapidly verify the expected knowledge gaps in the community. So you post these administrator posted questions, you post these questions yourself, and people answer those questions, and you try to figure out whether there are any particular questions that people are more likely to incorrectly answer. So these could be development related questions, these could be health related questions, these could be agriculture related questions, these could be anything. So one of the goals was Sawaal to become this platform where you mine or you verify the knowledge gaps in the community. The second goal was dissemination of specific information to address these gaps. So once you find that the user is incorrectly answering a question, you can immediately give them an answer explanation to fill that knowledge gap. So it's like a specific information that you're providing them, specific to them, because they did not know the correct answer. And then finally, you can do it again and again. You can rephrase the questions and ask them again after a few days to figure out the knowledge retention, the temporal knowledge retention. You did give them the correct explanation and the correct knowledge, but did they remember it? Did they remember the knowledge, or did they just remember the wordings of it? So that's where the rephrasing of the questions comes into play. All right, so the features of this platform were that it spreads virally as users challenge friends to quiz competitions. So there is a gamification aspect here. You can answer questions and you can invite your friend. You can challenge your friend to come in and compete for high scores. Your administrator posted questions allow confirming these specific knowledge gaps, as we just discussed. The platform spreads correct information via quiz solutions, and it measures knowledge retention via rephrased, repeated questions. All right, so this time I won't bore you with yet another demo. You've already seen two, you know how it works, but this is the basic call flow. A user places a missed call to Sawaal, and Sawaal calls back and allows the user to attempt a posted question, to record a new question, to listen to top scores and rankings, to listen to your own score and rankings, to listen to stats of your posted and shared questions. So the challenges that you rolled out, how did they fare, and record your feedback for us. And after attempting every question, you can like it, dislike it. So these are coming from Baang. Report abuse, you can audio comment on it, you can forward that question to someone else, and you can record your own question, your new question for the platform, and or you could go back to the main menu or to the next question. So that was the simple interface of Sawaal. There was a sophisticated algorithm in the background that was basically releasing so there were like three main types of questions on the platform. One were the questions that were posted by the users, the community questions. There were also the questions that we posted, the administrator questions, which were of two types. One, what we call the original question, and the other a rephrased question. So essentially they're just like a pair of questions. We recorded all questions as pairs and rephrase them in two different ways, so that we can release them at different intervals in between that pair of questions, to figure out how long, like what's the temporal knowledge retention of that question. So so many of those things were happening, and there was a background algorithm that was controlling how to release various questions of these three types, like how many of these questions to release to the user in what order. All right, so these are the overall stats of Sawaal. So within 14 weeks, we had received 120,000 calls by 3,400 users. They were an overall 13,000 community generated questions. These were attempted 455,000 times by 2,000 users. The questions were answered correctly and incorrectly, roughly a balanced number of times. There were a lot of upvotes, downvotes, abuse votes, around 6,000 voice comments, and 21,000 shares where people forwarded the messages, the questions to their friends. All right, so the knowledge retention, as we just discussed, our mechanism was that we used these administrator posted questions, and we posted two versions of each question, and the repeated questions were equally distributed over predefined intervals of corresponding original questions. So like for example, for some of the questions we released the repeat question or the rephrased question immediately, like within the same session. For some of the questions, for some of the pairs, we release them after 24 hours, for some we release them after 48 hours, and for some we release them after 7 days, to figure out like how much like what's the interval for which users retain this information. There were a total of 184 administrator posted questions, so 92 original questions, 92 rephrased questions, and these were attempted 65,000 times by 1,300 users. They were correctly answered 32,000 times and incorrectly answered also 32,500 times. So a balanced number of correct and incorrect attempts by these users. So here are some examples. So this is an example original question: where does dengue mosquito lay its eggs? Option 1, dirty stagnant water. Option 2, clean stagnant water. Option 3, which is the correct option, both 1 and 2, and option 4, in the hides of other animals. The repeat question that we created for this was usually which one of these is a common breeding place for dengue mosquitoes. So and you can see the options here. So this is how this rephrasing was working. So for this question, 33% of users correctly answered the original question, 34% of the rest selected dirty water, 32% selected clean water. So there was no clear preference amongst the remaining users, and the repeat question was correctly answered by 59% users. So we can see an improvement here, but we also see that the number of users who attempted the repeat question is fairly low, because again there was that user retention that you're playing against. So lesser number of users are attempting questions which are released to them down the line after a few days. All right, so here is what these are our overall findings from the temporal noise retention compared to the fraction of correct responses on original questions against corresponding rephrased questions. We use paired t-test here. The improvements are statistically significant for intervals of 2 days, 3 to 7 days, and 8 to 14 days, but there was no significant retention of knowledge found beyond the 14-day mark. So knowledge retention gradually decreases over the 14-day period, and we did not find evidence for it beyond the 14 days. Obviously, we also did not have a lot of users who were beyond that so like we were dealing with very small set of users beyond the 2-week mark to give us any reliable results. But yeah, this is what we found from the from this intervention. All right, so here's a quick summary of what we have seen so far. For the question that how can we systematically develop techniques to enable large-scale and rapid dissemination of development-related information to underserved populations, we use viral entertainment as a conduit for delivering useful information. For mechanisms of content generation, classification, and moderation, we use social connectivity and community-driven content generation and moderation. And for impact measurement, we use viral community quizzes to verify the extent of expected knowledge gaps, to disseminate specific information, and to measure knowledge retention. All right, so this is the service for which we were building up all of these bases for. So Super Abbu, this is a service that so Sacha was the program manager for this service, and she was also one of the pioneers who came up with this idea, and who basically had the capability of taking it all the way to from its conception to its realization. So the basic idea of Super Abbu was to create a maternal health information hotline for expectant fathers. So the basic premise here was that in this part of the world, men are the decision makers of the family, both administratively, financially, and in other important ways. So and it's ironic that it's men who are not targeted with any good information or useful information about maternal health. So the way health systems are set up here in Pakistan is that men are not allowed into the maternal health clinics and the places where the doctors are. They do not directly interact with the gynecologists. So we believe that there is an appetite for good knowledge amongst expectant fathers of how they can take care of their wives, their partners. However, they have no ways of reaching that information. So we decided to come up with this hotline designed specifically for men, which allows expectant fathers to discreetly record maternal health related questions for trained gynecologists who receive these questions on their smartphones. They respond to these questions, and then calls are placed to those fathers, and they are given the answers to their queries. They have the capability of marking these questions as private or public, so that either if they're public, then others can also listen to those interactions, and if they're private, then only they have access to the actual question and the response of the question, in addition to the gynecologist who has answered it. And then the interface also allowed, Super Abbu also allowed these parents, these fathers, to share their experiences and stories with others. So this was UNICEF funded. One of the goals of this platform was to see if there is such an appetite, if people are interested in such information. And so we reached out. The service was able to reach more than 21,000 users in its initial large-scale deployment. So there were 39,000 phone calls, 6,600 questions that were recorded by users, and 1,100 stories that were shared by them. There were 500 comments, around 3,000 feedback recordings. These were messages for us to improve the service, and the content was forwarded 5,000 times and voted on 31,000 times. So there was an enthusiastic response to the Super Abbu by our audience. After the completion of the UNICEF-funded Super Abbu, we became interested in the actual impact evaluation of the Super Abbu hotline, like the actual changes that it makes in the knowledge and beliefs and health related practices of these families who have received this information from us. So we wanted to do an impact evaluation of Super Abbu to investigate improvements in knowledge, attitudes, behaviors, and birth outcomes using randomized controlled trials. The plan, which is basically in action right now. So this is NIH funded, and the pilot is in the launch phase right now. So we have performed ethnographic surveys, and we are recruiting these expectant parents as participants of the platform. There are multiple treatment arms, and users in those arms are exposed to different versions of Super Abbu. And we are experimenting with social connectivity, financial incentives, and quiz-based automatic evaluation on top of the basic version of the Super Abbu. So the Super Abbu has also evolved over time, and let me share with you some of the major changes. So the new design of Super Abbu hotline incorporates features from the original UNICEF Super Abbu, which had the option for parents to record their questions for gynecologists and also to share their stories with others. So now we also have like Baang-like features of voting and commenting and sharing. We also have Sawaal-like features where we have maternal health related quizzes for these parents. So the platform now allows users to record questions for doctors, to share stories with others, to browse public questions and stories, and to answer quiz questions. This platform is completely pre-moderated, so everything that gets posted for social consumption has to be listened by our moderator before it gets posted on the platform. Okay, so the new version of the platform, basically we have created like multiple versions of it, and we have played with two variables here. The first is the social aspect of the platform. So we have a social version which allows users to share and comment on content, and there is an individual version where the user is just the one user of the service, so there is no social aspect. Users can vote on content, but each user remains the sole user of the platform. They cannot share the content with others, like there is no forwarding option, there is no commenting option, and also there is an incentivization variable which allows some of the users who are exposed to that to earn monetary rewards for correctly answering quiz questions. So here are the four treatment arms of the platform. So we have a social version with financial incentives for answering quiz questions. We have an individual version with financial incentives. We have an individual version without financial incentives, and we have a social version without financial incentives. So there are the groups of users who are accessing these platforms are mutually exclusive, and we want to figure out the role that social connectivity and financial incentives play in the spread, retention, engagement, knowledge retention, and various other aspects of this health messaging that we want to do using Super Abbu. So this is work in progress. This is happening right now. The pilot has been launched. Users are calling in. So hopefully very soon we should have some results to answer some of these questions for you. All right, so this is where we're going to stop. I hope you enjoyed this short talk. If you have any questions, please feel free to pass them on to me through Sasha, and I will answer them as soon as possible. Please also go through the papers that I've shared with you. There are also other related papers on my website. So you see my website here, aghaliraza.com. So please explore the different papers that I have there. They're on related topics. We also have papers on the speech and language technology work that we're doing. If you're interested in those things, or machine learning, please feel free to reach out to me as well. So yep, it was a great experience being with you, and it was I love to record this talk for you, and I hope that someday we may interact with each other face to face as well when this COVID situation is better. Take care, and bye bye.